I realized something was terribly wrong with my cousin on the night I saw him crouched in the dark, his silhouette bent over something that looked horribly alive, and for the first time in my life, I felt that the person I had grown up with wasn't fully human but something pretending to be human just well enough to blend in. It was past midnight. I was walking home after visiting a friend, the village silent except for the rustling of dry leaves under my feet, when I heard a faint, painful whimper from behind the old banyan tree near the edge of the fields, and thinking it might be an injured animal, I stepped closer, but as I approached, the moon slid out from behind a cloud and its pale light fell on a figure I recognized instantly. My cousin, hunched in an unnatural posture, shoulders lifted, spine curved like a wild animal protecting its prey, and the way his arms moved, quick, jerky, desperate, made my blood turn cold, because no human I had ever seen moved like that. I wanted to call his name, ask if he needed help, but my voice got trapped in my throat as if my body itself refused to alert him to my presence, and then he stopped moving, froze completely, and slowly, impossibly slowly, he lifted his head and turned toward me, not by twisting his whole body like a person, but by bending his neck in a way that looked too flexible, too loose, too wrong, and when his eyes met mine, they didn't hold fear or guilt or surprise. They held hunger, pure and simple, a hunger I had never seen in a human being before. He stared at me for a long second that stretched like an eternity, then the corners of his lips lifted in the faintest, most chilling smile I had ever seen, as if he was acknowledging that I had finally witnessed what he'd been hiding, but instead of coming toward me, he slowly backed into the shadows until the darkness swallowed him whole, leaving me frozen in place, unable to breathe. When I finally managed to run, I ran blindly all the way home, burst into my room, locked the door, and spent the entire night sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the door, terrified that at any second he might quietly turn the handle and step inside with that same hungry smile. The next morning, when I saw him at breakfast acting completely normal, cracking jokes with my parents, sipping tea as if the night before had never happened, I felt my stomach twist, because nothing is more terrifying than a monster who knows how to play human perfectly. When I tried asking him casually why he'd been outside so late, he didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, didn't show a single sign of worry. Instead he smiled in that calm, polite way he always did and said, "Sometimes I like walking alone at night. It clears the mind. You should try it." And the way he emphasized the last sentence made me feel like he was testing me, checking whether I would confront him or stay silent. I realized then that he knew I had seen him, and for some reason, he wasn't trying to scare me or silence me. Not yet. He was simply watching me, waiting, as if he enjoyed the idea of me living with the knowledge of what he truly was. And the worst part was knowing that nobody else would ever believe me, because to everyone else he was the perfect person. Smart, polite, well-spoken, respected, someone parents trusted, someone neighbors praised, someone everyone described as a good boy. But I had seen the side of him that lurked beneath the polite smiles and friendly greetings, the side that came alive only at night, the side that devoured things I didn't dare imagine, and since that night, I've lived with the horrifying certainty that he isn't just dangerous in the dark. He's studying me in the daylight, deciding when he will stop pretending and reveal the truth that he kept hidden for so long. And every time his eyes linger on me a little too long across the dinner table, I feel the same cold dread crawl up my spine, telling me that I might be the next thing he hungers for. After that night my life became a constant performance of pretending nothing was wrong while every instinct inside me screamed to run, because the more I observed my cousin, the more the truth revealed itself in small, horrifying details. How he moved too silently for someone his size. How his eyes reflected light like an animal's when he thought no one was looking. How he always avoided food during family meals but returned from late-night walks with an unnatural calmness, as if something inside him had been fed. I started noticing disappearances in the area too, small at first. Stray dogs, missing chickens, but then people began whispering about a farmhand who didn't show up for work, a traveler who never made it to the next village, and even though no one connected these events to my cousin, I knew deep down he was involved, especially when I overheard him telling my mother that the village felt quieter lately, with a tone that sounded almost satisfied, and it terrified me how easily he hid behind kindness and charm while his true nature remained unseen by everyone else. I tried staying away from him, avoiding eye contact, keeping my door locked at night, but he always found excuses to be near me. Sitting beside me during meals, asking if I wanted to go for a walk, knocking on my door late at night with the excuse of needing help with something, and each time I refused, I saw a flicker of something dark in his expression, something that told me patience wasn't his strongest trait. One night, while I pretended to sleep, I heard soft footsteps outside my room, slow and deliberate, stopping right in front of my door, and even though I didn't move, I felt his presence like a shadow seeping through the cracks, felt his breath lingering just beyond the threshold, as if he was listening for the rhythm of my pulse through the wood, and only after several long minutes did the footsteps finally fade away, leaving me trembling under my blanket. The next morning he acted as if nothing happened, greeting me with a bright, "Good morning," that felt like mockery, a reminder that he could reach me anytime he wanted. My fear turned to determination when I began investigating on my own, searching old books, folklore, anything that might explain what he was, and the more I read, the more pieces fit together, descriptions of human eaters who mimic human behavior, predators that hide in plain sight for years, creatures who maintain the illusion of normalcy but reveal their true nature during hunts, and I realized that my cousin wasn't possessed or cursed. He was born different, something ancient wearing the skin of a man, something that saw people as prey, not family. Everything became worse when I found something buried in the fields behind our house. A torn piece of fabric from the missing farmhand's jacket, stained and half buried under disturbed soil, and the moment I spotted it, I felt a presence behind me, and when I turned, my cousin stood there with a calm smile, asking gently, "What did you find?" Even though he already knew, I hid the evidence behind my back and forced a smile, saying it was nothing, but his eyes narrowed slightly, sensing my fear, and he stepped closer, too close, placing a hand on my shoulder in a way that felt like a silent promise that he owned the truth in my silence. That night he visited my room again, but this time he didn't try to hide it. He opened the door slowly, stepped inside without asking, and stood by my bed, watching me with an expression that held no humanity at all, and before I could react, he whispered in a voice colder than the night air, "You've seen too much," letting the words hang in the darkness before adding, "But I can still trust you, can't I?" As if daring me to lie, testing my loyalty, deciding whether I was family or food. I nodded, terrified, assuring him I would never tell anyone, and after several long seconds he smiled and walked out, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me with the horrifying realization that as long as he believed I was loyal, I would live another day, and as long as I pretended to be blind to the truth, I could buy time to figure out how to survive a monster who wore my cousin's face. But deep down, I knew time was running out, because predators don't keep secrets forever, and sooner or later he would decide whether I was a witness he could trust, or the next meal he needed to silence. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever, that living in the same house with my cousin who hid such a dark secret was like walking on a knife's edge, and the more I observed him, the more I realized that he wasn't just dangerous at night. He was calculating, clever, and completely aware of the effect he had on me. Every word, every gesture, every glance felt like a test, and I had no idea how close I was to crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, so I began following him cautiously whenever he left the house late at night, keeping to the shadows and listening to his movements through the quiet village streets, and what I discovered made my stomach twist in fear because he didn't wander aimlessly. He moved with purpose, slipping between empty houses, stopping at backyards and alleyways, and each time he crouched or lingered, I caught glimpses of something being buried or retrieved, objects I couldn't yet identify but which I instinctively knew were part of the horrifying truth I had glimpsed the week before. I began marking the spots he visited, noticing patterns, trying to predict where he would go next, and with each step, the realization hit me harder that I was studying a predator who had spent years mastering how to be invisible while living among humans, and that every plan I made, every decision I took, had to be flawless because a single mistake could cost me everything. One night, I followed him deeper into the woods beyond the village, where the moonlight barely touched the ground, and I saw him kneeling in a small clearing, carefully handling a collection of items that had clearly belonged to the people who had vanished over the past months, arranging them neatly on the ground as if he were cataloging trophies, and my heart pounded so violently I thought he might hear it, but he didn't seem to notice me at all. I wanted to run, to scream, to warn someone, but I stayed hidden, realizing that my survival depended on patience, observation, and understanding, and as I watched, He turned slightly and muttered to himself, "They were weak. They didn't understand. But you might," and that tiny acknowledgement made my blood run cold, because it meant I wasn't invisible to him either, that he had already decided I mattered in some way, though whether for protection or prey, I couldn't yet tell. I spent the following days creating a mental map of his movements, noticing subtle habits. The way he always checked locks on doors, how he avoided certain streets where neighbors might be awake, how he listened intently to any unusual sounds and paused his activities when someone came too close, and in learning his routines, I also began learning his limits, the small cracks in his behavior that hinted he wasn't invincible, and while it terrified me that he was capable of things no human should be capable of, it also gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe I could survive if I understood him well enough. One evening, he invited me to walk with him again, and though every instinct screamed to refuse, I realized that refusing outright would make him suspicious, so I followed at a safe distance, pretending calm, observing every micro-expression, every shift in his posture, and when he spoke casually about the village and the quiet nights, I detected an edge in his tone that was impossible to describe, a mix of pride and warning, like he was asserting dominance without moving a muscle, and I understood that living under the same roof with him was no longer a matter of choice. It was a test, and my only chance was to anticipate him before he anticipated me, to see the monster clearly and yet remain just human enough to survive, because if I misstepped, if I underestimated the subtle intelligence behind his eyes, then my curiosity could very well be the end of me. Every day after that, I realized that simply surviving alongside my cousin required more than caution. It required understanding him in ways I never thought possible, because he didn't act like a monster who relied on brute force. He acted like a patient strategist, someone who could wait indefinitely for the right moment to reveal his true self, and each encounter with him was a delicate balance between acknowledging the truth I had seen and pretending ignorance, walking the thin line of fear and composure while knowing he was silently observing, studying my reactions, deciding what I could handle, and what I couldn't. I started noticing subtle signs in his daily behavior, how he would glance at certain places in the house with a focused gaze that seemed out of place for a human, how he avoided my direct questions with a calm smile, how he sometimes hummed quietly to himself as if calculating something beyond my comprehension, and the more I learned about him, the more I realized that he wasn't driven by malice alone, but by a set of instincts and rules I could not understand, and yet I had to respect them if I wanted to remain unharmed. One evening, I decided to confront him indirectly by asking him to help me with chores outside the house, keeping my tone casual, my hands busy so he wouldn't notice my nervousness, and to my surprise, he agreed with a simple nod, moving with the same fluid, controlled grace I had seen during his nighttime excursions, and as we worked side by side, I began to notice his expression soften slightly when he thought I wasn't paying attention, a subtle sign that maybe he was capable of connection, that maybe there was a version of him that could exist alongside humans without giving in completely to the instincts I feared most. That realization gave me hope, but it was fragile, because even as I tried to understand him, I could not ignore the incidents I had witnessed, the glimpses of a nature too dangerous to fully trust, and the moments when his eyes flickered with that hunger I could never forget. One night, after a long day, he invited me to sit with him in the backyard under the stars, and I noticed for the first time he wasn't crouched, wasn't hiding, but simply staring at the sky as if he was lost in thought, and I dared to ask gently, "Do you ever wish you could be normal?" He didn't answer immediately, then finally said, "Normal is a choice, but some of us are born to live differently. You cannot judge what you do not understand, and fear blinds more than it protects." Those words stayed with me, and I realized that fear alone could not dictate my life, that understanding, even partial understanding, was the key to surviving beside someone like him. Over the following weeks, I learned to coexist carefully, observing him, predicting his patterns, respecting the boundaries his instincts required, and slowly a strange sense of balance emerged. I was cautious, yet he never crossed certain lines, and I realized he had limits shaped by an unexpected code, a set of rules he followed even when no one was watching, which meant survival was possible if I adapted and remained alert. In the end, the truth became clear to me. Monsters exist not only in stories, but in the shadows of the people we think we know, and living safely beside them requires courage, intelligence, and respect for forces beyond our comprehension, and most importantly, it requires humility, the understanding that some beings will never fully be like us, and our survival depends on accepting the truth while maintaining our humanity. Moral lesson: not all dangers are obvious, and not all monsters wear monstrous faces. Survival sometimes means observing quietly, understanding deeply, and respecting boundaries that are beyond ordinary comprehension, because wisdom and caution can be more powerful than strength or confrontation.